Ferruccio Lamborghini clearly thought this car was a mistake. Why else would he sell his stake in Automobili Lamborghini right before the first Countach went into production? Around the world, the oil crisis was shrinking engine and car sizes, along with the size of everyone's wallets. Exotic European sports cars with their large displacement, fuel-hungry V12s, like the one he was about to make, were starting to look irresponsibly indulgent. Ferruccio preferred easy to drive and comfortable Grand Touras. To him, sports cars were too skittish, too noisy, and a tad bit too dramatic. So why make this? And if you do, why does it end up working? How does something that to Lamborghini walk like a blunder and talk like a blunder end up defining his brand? Romantic modernists like Pininfarina, Zagato, and Scaglietti, descendants of a proud lineage of bespoke carrozzerie or coach builders, were experts at designing exquisite, flowing, and elegant bodywork. With bare hands, they turned the Grand Touras of the 50s and 60s into rolling embodiments of what the Italians called La Dolce Vita. With aerodynamics in its infancy, whatever looked fast was fast. Besides, hand-shaped metal bent more willingly into curves than into angles. At the time, the real garages of the wealthiest of car lovers and the dream garages of the rest were adorned with cars that could be described as sculptures on wheels. Grand Touras with the looks to steer every stray gaze, the long legs to crunch hundreds of miles, and the power and opulence to make it feel effortless. One such wealthy Italian, as it happened, was Ferruccio Lamborghini. Having amassed wealth mainly through his tractor empire, he became a connoisseur of GT cars. Among them were several Ferraris, including multiple 250 Grand Touras, which he drove often but never without complaint. Their fragile clutches had become a constant source of frustration for him. When Ferruccio took his complaints directly to Enzo Ferrari, he was waved off with contempt. Stung by the dismissal and the ridicule for daring to question Maranello, Ferruccio pledged to build a GT car superior to a Ferrari. Fast forward to the early 60s, Lamborghini had caught up to Ferrari in the GT game. However, Lamborghini's greatest achievement came with the Miura in 1966. The Miura was an after-hours project developed by the ambitious 20-something employees at Lamborghini. Dallara and Stanzani, with driver Bob Wallace, designed and tested it to be road and track worthy. Not that the Miura would ever see a track, not if Ferruccio had anything to say about it. It was mostly similar in design to its road-going peers from other stables. However, one key detail was different. Something no one else had dared to do yet, not even Ferrari. At Le Mans, the mid-engine layout had already displayed its superiority for years by then. First, Enzo Ferrari's Scuderia dominated with their racing prototypes, which spawned the 250 GTO. In later years, both Ford and Porsche would humble them at the same venue with the same configuration. As well as they did on track, Enzo Ferrari insisted that mid-engine sports cars would be unsafe in the hands of regular Joe customer. So, while his Scuderia raced with the mid-engine 250 prototypes, his road-going 250 GTs remained front-engined. Consequently, when the rolling chassis of the yet unnamed Miura was showcased at Turin in 1965 with a transverse mid-mounted V12, Lamborghini significantly undercut Ferrari where road cars were concerned. Despite the technical superiority of the setup, sales numbers echoed Ferruccio's preference for comfort and drivability. The later Espada did better numbers in terms of units sold compared to the Miura. The Espada was a lot calmer and its 2+2 configuration much more practical. However, calm and practical were not what had elevated Lamborghini to unprecedented levels of desirability. It was the mad rush of adrenaline from a screaming V12 placed right behind the driver's ears. The Miura was the first quintessential poster car. It was genesis for both the entirely new category of the supercar and a strategy that would define the Lamborghini brand for decades to come. Drama and theatre. Ferruccio's confidence in the new designer at Bertone, Marcello Gandini, had already been built with the success of the Miura and the Espada. Though apprehensive at first, realizing that his own interest in outshining Ferrari and Marcello's interest in outclassing the likes of Pininfarina and Italdesign were aligned, Ferruccio handed Gandini the opportunity of a lifetime. Gandini would be the one to design Lamborghini's next halo car. In the late 60s and early 70s, brutalist architecture was at its peak. It discarded intricate details and ornamental beauty for bare concrete and aluminium surfaces. In the world of product design, stalwarts like Dieter Rams of Braun crystallized the idea of less but better, rejecting unnecessary detail for honesty and minimalism. In pop culture, movies like 1968's 2001: A Space Odyssey imagined a future in stark geometry, vast white spaces, and angular forms. However, it was the moon landing of 1969 that ushered humanity into the next decade with a wide-eyed view of the future. These cultural and socio-economic shifts, although triggered by the counterculture movement and economic scarcity, had the world looking forward to a simpler yet aspirational future. This landscape also visibly inspired Gandini's designs. Gandini deprived the Countach of the familiar, flowing, romantic curves of the Miura, instead exposing sharp geometry that looked engineered rather than sculpted. The body became a set of planes and wedges. The side profile was a continuous rising wedge from front to back, accommodating the mid-engine design and forward cap configuration. The scissor doors rose defiantly upwards against convention. The Countach had become a car that embraced rebellion and futurism, rather than conformity and nostalgia. It stood as a cultural provocation, which Lamborghini is still known for to this day. After the interest the prototype Countach drew at the 1971 Geneva Motor Show, Ferruccio was hopeful that this would elevate Lamborghini to exactly where he had once envisioned it. Despite the success though, with the Miura, the Espada and the prototype Countach, Ferruccio at the time was facing major financial difficulties. A Bolivian coup and a monopolistic consolidation of Fiat's tractor business had unfortunately coincided to leave him close to financial ruin. Moreover, he remained convinced that the Countach project was too extreme and too difficult to pull off. His interest still lay in refining Grand Touras instead of chasing exoticism. Ultimately, he decided to walk away from the stage, just as the Countach stepped into the spotlight. In the subsequent years to its launch, the Countach became the most popular supercar ever. Arguably, it single-handedly turned Lamborghinis into the cult classics they remain today. Ferrari fought back with the Berlinetta Boxer, but it was too little, too late. They finally made a return to form with the 1984 288 GTO. By then, however, Lamborghini's Countach had already staked its claim in the supercar master race. It gave Lamborghini a much needed head start and firm footing, ensuring that in some form, a Lamborghini would continue to occupy bedroom walls, Hot Wheels collections, and screensavers for generations of enthusiasts. Just as launching a V12 gas-guzzling supercar at the peak of an oil crisis made no economic sense, in 2021, Lamborghini unveiled the LPI 800-4 Countach, another naturally aspirated 6.5-liter V12 supercar in the era of shrinking engines and electric hypercars. Even though its supercapacitor technically makes it a hybrid, it seems Lamborghini's competitors are busy reducing their engine sizes, while Lamborghini, for now at least, refuses to silence the growl of its flagship power plant. See, those at Lamborghini today remember what Ferruccio figured out almost half a century ago. They don't just sell cars, they sell dreams, drama, and theatre. And obviously, they want the dreams motorists have to continue to be about owning a Lambo. Even among the tiny fraction of humanity that ever gets to drive a Lamborghini, fewer still will get to drive this one. they only made 112 of these, and no more shall be made. Not that many had a chance to buy it. All of them were sold out, even before it was unveiled. It's obvious then that the intention behind the 2021 Countach was never to shift a large number of units. Perhaps it was to keep us dreaming about one day. Or perhaps it was to wave a last goodbye to the V12 the world first heard in the mirror before electrification takes over. I'd like to think it was a bit of both. As for Ferruccio Lamborghini, while his name has become synonymous with poster cars and excess, he lived his life out quietly among his vineyards, making olive oil and wine, never having fully embraced the very car that defined his legacy.